Hi and welcome to SQL Server Error 8120. My name is Ami Levin. You can find out more about me in the links below. By the end of this training, you will know what Error 8120 is, why your queries fail with it, and how to correct your queries to avoid it. To demonstrate the root cause, it is helpful to use a simplified dataset with only a few rows, such as this customer's table. It includes only name as the primary key and a zip code. Suppose you need to write a query to calculate how many customers we have in each zip code area. You may come up with a query like this one, but when you try to execute it, you get the dreaded error 8120. Name is invalid in the select list because it is not contained in either an aggregate function or the group by clause. While the error text is quite verbose, I often see even experienced developers scratch their heads trying to figure out what's going on. To understand the source of the error, we must first understand how the query is processed by the database engine. In contrast to the written order, processing always begins with a from clause. This is where the source set that will be used by the rest of the query is evaluated. The results are then passed on as a virtual table to the next processing phase. In our query, there are no joins and there is no where filter, so the customer's table is passed as is to the group by clause. The group by clause evaluates all rows and looks for common values for all group by expressions, and then logically groups them together into a single grouped row. Obviously, the only expressions that are guaranteed to have the same value for all original rows within the group are the ones that were used as the group by expression. For our query, it's just the zip code. Now, this grouped virtual table is passed on to the next phase, the select clause. The select clause needs to evaluate all the select list expressions, but remember that only one row will be returned for each group. Let's pretend that we are the SQL engine and try to evaluate what values we should return. Zip code, which is a group by expression, is guaranteed to have only one value for the group. In our query, these values are 97403 and 77562 respectively. However, trying to evaluate which name to return doesn't make any sense, as there are potentially multiple names for each zip code group. Which one should we return for 97403? Heather, John, or Sarah? This is logically incorrect. We cannot return all names from the group together with the group's common element in a single row, and this is the source of our error. The count star, or any other aggregate function, will always return a single value for a set of elements. So there is no ambiguity, and the counts are returned as a single scalar value per group, in our case a 3 and a 1 respectively. Now the error message makes perfect sense. Name is invalid in the select list because it is not contained in either an aggregate function or the group by clause, either of which are necessary to guarantee that the engine can return a single value for each output row, which corresponds to each zip code group. To eliminate the error, we need to either remove name from the select list, or add it to the group by clause, or encapsulate it in an aggregate function. For example, the max aggregate function will return a single name, the one with the highest alphabetical sort order, or Sarah in our case. Any of these changes will make our query logically valid and avoid the error. You should also be aware that by default, some database platforms, including the very popular SQLite and MySQL, will not raise an error for this wrong query and instead just pick an arbitrary value from the group. SQLite even has a name for it. They call it bare columns and list it as a feature. Now, I am sure that the next time you encounter this error, you will be able to correct your queries to make them logically valid. I also hope that you will be extremely careful if you happen to be using a database platform that doesn't respect this logical rule. This training did not include a demo due to time constraints, but I've added some links below for you to download the script and some pre-populated SQL Fiddle pages that you can use to execute the example queries on various database engines. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope to see you in my next SQL training.